I don't know how to get you before they mutinied. Oh, yeah. Let's get that person out of the background. 1, 2, 3. Got it. Thank you. Yeah, right. I will later. Yeah.
But I went down through for the first time. We got to talk about Honduras.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I lived there for 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Where?
I was in Tegucigalpa.
Okay. All over. This group I go with, these hospitals I work with are in San Pedro Sula. So I haven't been to Tegucigalpa, which is funny because it's the capital, but.
Brother of a friend years ago, this guy had open heart surgery and those were probably
Okay. I've heard the name, yeah.
31.
Okay. I'm going to give the podium mic just for when I give the introduction. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Grand Rounds. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Dr. Ramin Jamshidi. He's a native of Northern California and holds degrees in physics and chemistry in addition to his medical degree. He graduated from UC San Diego and on an academic UC Regent Scholarship, and then spent a year at Harvard University as a visiting undergraduate scholar. Then he went to medical school in Colorado, where he served on the physics faculty at the University of Denver. While at University of California, San Francisco for a surgical residency, he spent 2 years as a fetal surgery fellow and postdoctoral researcher, concentrating on medical device design and surgical education. Concurrently, he was on the physics faculty of UCSF, and then following general surgery training, he completed pediatric surgery fellowship under the mentorship of Dr. Keith Oldham and Thomas Sato at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Then in 2012, he came to Phoenix and joined the Pediatric Surgeons of Phoenix Children's Hospital. Dr. Jamshidi is board certified in general surgery as well as pediatric surgery. He's a fellow of the American College of Surgeons and was elected to fellowship in the prestigious American Association for the Surgery of Trauma. He's also the director of endocrine surgery and the assistant program director at the Mayo Clinic PCH Pediatric Surgery Fellowship. His particular clinical interests are in the endocrine and thyroid disease, thoracic and vascular disease, as well as trauma, oncology, and complex minimally invasive surgery, including single incision laparoscopy. He also has research efforts focused on 3 areas: physical science and medicine, such as device design, medical education, and clinical outcomes. Global health is another frequent activity of Dr. Jamshidi. He was named a Global Health Scholar at UC San Francisco and has ongoing relationships with groups in Guatemala, Peru, and Honduras. Dr. Jamshidi lives here in Phoenix with his wife and children, spending as much time as possible in the outdoors, but not in July. They enjoy combining healthcare knowledge and outdoor experiences to serve global health and wilderness medicine roles. He's also fluent in Spanish and Farsi, which is also called Persian. And this morning, he's actually not going to be talking primarily about surgery, but rather about the environment and how we can dial down hospital trash through a team effort. So without further ado, Dr. Jamshidi, it's yours.
Thank you, Dr. Hartley.
And his family assertivism. So let's give a round of applause for
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Hartley. It's certainly uncomfortable to sit and listen to yourself be talked about, and I was interested in much of that. But I hope that this topic today is of interest and touches on everybody's lives and all the various departments that make up a big institution like ours. So can everybody hear me okay? And Matt, we're still good back there? Awesome. I see your thumbs up. So I'm inherently biased about this topic, but I'm not making money off of it. We're going to talk about how waste is a problem, where healthcare contributes to that problem, what progress we've made at Phoenix Children's along this realm, and where there are future opportunities. You know what I forgot, Matt, is we figured out the mic so that I could walk around and not be caged up, but I didn't grab a clicker. That's okay. So, or maybe, this'll work. I just walk with the mouse. It's a wireless mouse. So waste is a problem. And the primary solution to it's not very clever, right? We dig holes in the ground and we stuff the trash in the ground. There are myriad impacts of that. The impacts disproportionately burden our youth, not just in terms of years of life to live, but in health impacts. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But the other issue, as we'll get to, is that we run out of space to keep digging holes to put the trash in. So the tides are shifting with expanding scientific knowledge, with a generational shift in attention to the environment. I mean, if you looked at the spreads of ages in this room, you'd see differences or hear differences in people's awareness, attention to, and care about environmental matters. Makes impressions on youth. The Lorax came back 40 years after the book was written. We talked to our kids, and this is something they hear about and are generally interested in. On the opposite end of that spectrum, right? Innocent, pure-hearted children in the corporate realm. Even many large Fortune 500 companies have come to establish corporate sustainability officers that oversee some of those elements of their businesses and their practices. I don't know if that tide came before or after social media manager, but I'm gonna dice that up. But as I said, we're gonna get to limitations. We're gonna run out of room for landfill. There's just not gonna be more room to dig holes. And people are fine with it if it's out of sight or it's in the next state, or it's getting shipped off on a barge to a country that you've never heard of because they can't afford to say no to us. But when it's in your backyard, right? That's what the NIMBY was on the prior slide, not in my backyard, then people start caring a bit more. So to see these shifting tides, I think it was probably about 15 or 20 years ago, I started noticing in other countries that trash started being labeled landfill. You see up here. And maybe about 10 years ago, I feel like you started seeing little bits of it here and there in the States, definitely in the last 5 or 6 years. these are all little innovations we can talk about if you guys are curious. My goal, by the way, is to get through sharing with you some of this story, this information. I even brought some little show and tell stuff if people are interested. And I hope that we can open up a decent amount of time to ask questions, because I think they may span a variety of subtopics. Myriad collection containers, right? That's in the snow in Whistler, British Columbia on the left. And on the right is IKEA. Even Phoenix Airport, right? There's Roya giving you the wave off on the landfill bin, which is, I was pretty excited when I saw these in the Phoenix Airport, right? And then you walk outside and you see the single-use plastic bottles stuffed in the trash. You walk to the next curb and you see, oh, that's great. Okay, they've got these recycling bins right here next to the trash. That's fantastic. And then you lean a little further and you take a peek inside. There's more of those single-use plastic bottles in the trash instead of the recycle bin right next to it. So some of this has to do with awareness and just changing ingrained habits. So healthcare, that's waste is a problem, right? Trash is a problem. So let me impress upon you that we contribute disproportionately to that in healthcare. 10 billion pounds per year. So a little bit of sloppy math in all these estimations that people make, but roughly 10 billion pounds per year of trash are generated in the US healthcare system. 5/6 of that roughly is from hospitals. And within the hospitals, in our realm, my world, my partner's world in the surgery, in the operating room, we actually contribute 30% of that hospital waste as just one active area, one department within the hospital. And that's 70% of the regulated medical waste, the hazardous and sharps materials. It goes in energy use. It goes to more general issues of inefficiency and manpower. We won't get into that. We won't get into electronic health records. I'm just going to talk about physical waste. But that's the issue with healthcare associated waste. In the OR, so I'm coning down a little more, and I want to talk about specifically within the OR. There are a number of reasons you can intuit why we generate more waste. Some of it has to do with efficiency. Time in and around the operating room is expensive, although a lot of times that's really kind of a surface excuse for convenience, right? So efficiency versus convenience, time management, concerns about infection and soilage, cleanliness versus sterility, and how that ties in with things like expiration dates. You have to have some degree of infrastructure. You have to have a place to gather these materials, sort them, and then parse them out to their different end destinations, which you're trying to make landfill the last option of. And then there are issues of packaging, cost. That upper right picture, anybody, we don't have those machines here at Phoenix Children's as of yet. Those are the scrub machines dispensed now at Scottsdale Shea at Honor Health as of like 2 years ago. So each individual scrub top and bottom comes out in filmy plastic, the hardest things to deal with and recycle. The bottom right, by the way, is one of a series of boxes of caps, of surgeon caps, OR caps, sterile caps that had expiration dates on them. So we took those right over to Honduras with us. And then the bottom left picture there is the most recent incarnation or implementation of what we're doing with our cloth, our laundry materials around, I believe around the hospital from what I've seen, certainly in the operating room, which is big, disposable, single-use plastic film bag with a drawstring and a lace lock like you probably want on your trail runners. Here's a quick question, pop quiz, because we're talking about waste and how much of this can be hazardous, and that is a concern for our recycling. So I'm not going to make you download another app you don't want, but you can't sit silently. You have to answer something. What % roughly of healthcare waste do you think is classified as hazardous, infectious, toxic, or radioactive? So mixed across the board, ACD. It is actually D. It's 15%. lower than you would intuit. We think that most things are unsalvageable or unusable, but it's not true. So there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot out there in order to reduce the tonnage of waste. I think we've all had ingrained in us now the concept of reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So I'm going to give you the cool new terminology that's evolving. This is kind of going away, like Mongolian blue spots and imperforate anus, or CCAM. So now the 3 R's kind of transitioning into the 5 R's, which incorporates refuse. That's not refuse, but refuse as in make a choice to refuse items that for which there may be a more sustainable alternative, right? Don't use a foam or plastic cup. Try and bring your own. Use packaging that's recyclable. And also the idea of repurposing, right? And this is where you hear about like upcycling or making alternate use out of something or fashioning it into another product altogether. It's a little messier than that because not everybody can agree on what those 5 R's should be. So there are a lot of schema in the environmental management realm where they've taken out repurpose and they're putting that in with reuse and they're putting rot at the bottom. And some people even disagree on whether that rot should refer to the last choice, which is to put it in landfill and let it rot, or whether that's a positive thing and the saying, well, maybe for the organic waste, it can be composted. So the 3 R's are drifting away. What the 5 R's are going to be remains to be settled. Maybe it just needs to be 6, but I'll just tell you that that's a wave that's out there. But the labeling is fairly inconsequential. I mean, it helps convey a message. But the issue in my mind, I say this a lot, that, and it will ring true at least with some of the people in this room, that once you start seeing the waste, it is hard to unsee. And it's not like a usual Sunday drive kind of thing, but take a drive sometime, go out to the Outer Valley and go look at one of these landfills. Go spend some time visiting a materials processing facility, a MRF. And it's breathtaking in a very disheartening way. You really do feel like, you know, the new Lorax movie, going to the edge of town, you know, where the Greco grass once grew. So it's hard to unsee this. So I came here at the end of 2012, and there was no recycling to be spoken of in the operating room, and around our entire facility is quite limited. There's scattered break rooms where there'd be a container for some plastic drink bottles or aluminum cans. That was about it by my assessment. So kind of conceived of this flow, this idea of how to implement some change. And I'm going to go through each of these steps along the way and kind of give you just a narrative. I want to tell you a story of where we've been over the last dozen or so years. So the first critical thing is that you have to recruit a crew. This is not a one-person mission. It is not a one-department mission. This truly involves, and it's such a cliche nowadays, but it really is a team sport. And it really involves people with a variety of resources, backgrounds, interests, viewpoints to even recognize, oh, I see this problem. Oh, I don't even know about that. That doesn't enter my daily realm. I'm not aware of that. Tell me more about that. So you have to recruit the crew. And for the operating room in particular, these are individuals that are critical. Notice I put environmental services actually at the top of the list, because you can do all you want, bagging and sorting and piling things up. But at some point, one of our friends comes to pick those things up and take them down to the loading dock, and then a truck picks them up and takes them where they're going to go. And so you need to make sure all those pieces are in place. To determine your capacity. So what I mean by that is you have to figure out, one has to figure out, what are the outlets? Where are these materials going? Are they going to my single stream waste management company that I'm contracted with? It just happens to be named Waste Management, right, as ours and one of the largest in the country. Or does it involve a number of other entities? And we'll get to to those kind of concepts and where we are with that in Phoenix Children's later. And then types of materials. I put them in a somewhat escalating order of Gesundheit, a combination of volume and complexity. The most straightforward, paper and either paper board or corrugated cardboard. So some products, this is a whole another hour-long discussion in this. And like I said, I'm going to leave it so that at the end, if more people are curious, we can talk about it more. But just know that some products are more recyclable than others. You know this. You know this from daily life. You go to visit friends in other cities. They say, we don't really have recycling here. You visit somebody somewhere else and they say, we put it all in the trash. Look at the lid, or in the recycling bin. The lid says you can put all of these things in here. And the typing of plastics has to do with its chemical composition. It actually does not define, it doesn't even define recyclability. When we see those symbols, I think, oh, that means it's recyclable. It's actually just a classification schema. And for the most part, those categories were chosen and those numbers assigned based on ease of recycling processes. So ones, polyethylene tetraphthalate, are the easiest to, from a chemical engineering process, the easiest to recycle. I was gonna put up a chemistry quiz on structures here and there, but I still want you to like me at the end of this, so I left it out. So then step 3, you gotta plan the logistics. So how is this going to happen? How are we gonna make it work? Hey, lofty idea. Let's take stuff out of trash, keep it from going to landfill. We've got somebody who's gonna accept it, but how do we get it there? What are the processes? It touches on a number of these things we've already talked about, like storage, sorting, and separation. How are you gonna collect it? So my concept when we started this was let's just be simple. Let's not try and solve everything all at once. Let's sink our teeth into a piece that is manageable, and then let's build a process around it that can then be expanded and amplified. So we conceived of a scheme and got it eventually approved to have another color of collection bags and to have a set of these other rolling trash bins, bag holders that would hold this other color. So each of our operating rooms and now some of our peri-op areas and our substerile center core have separate trash bins with this bluish colored bag. More stories for later if you're curious, but this was a whole battle because the box of these bags was pennies more than the other non-dyed, non-colored bags. And there's a whole battle about whether that was cost effective. I'll just leave it at that. So then get going, right? Then put rubber to the road, launch it and track the progress. And try and figure out how you're doing, quantify it for people so you can tell them, hey, those pennies on the bags, they're actually okay. So we started simple and we grew, right? We started with just one little, we started with the recycling bins in the rooms and we had one substerile collection bin, like another one of these soil linen bins for et cetera materials for possible reuse or donation. You'd have to turn it all over pretty quickly because as word got out and the staff were invested and bought into this, we were filling carts, walking them down the hall and down the elevator and out to the minivan. It's a family affair around my house. So there's Melissa while I'm on call waiting for me between OR cases to run down a cart and load up in there, and they take it down the road the next day to St. Joe's. That's Kayla and Michaela. I thought about that before. No relation. Part of the knowledge donor program and the sim lab over at St. Joe's in Creighton, taking all those things, those materials in for reuse. So there's a lot of elbow grease and there's a lot of individual work. It's, people that joke at the OR, oh, there goes Jamshidi, there goes Santa walking by with another cart of stuff, wheeling the stuff out. That's Nicole, one of our OR nurses, taking a load of stuff she was taking. And the more we could recruit people and have people to help even just sort and transport these things is really helpful. So it looks curious and it catches some side glances once in a while. So that picture of Nicole is kind of fuzzy, and I know she's watching on Zoom right now. I think a lot of the OR staff are up there watching. But that was on a security camera. Our very attentive and dutiful PCH security crowd caught her and was like, is this woman ripping PCH off? And where are all these things going? So they called up the OR in charge and whatever. And this became a whole thing around like the OR break room. So then they put, like wanted, and then that kind of grew into this thing. And so, there's fun to be had along the way. It was a lot of elbow grease. So tracking progress is difficult. It's just getting numbers, just talking to waste management, talking to some of our other outlets. A lot of it, we end up just grabbing, like I walk back and forth my bathroom scale from home, and recently bought a luggage scale for some other stuff there, and just measure it and making notes. Okay, this date, these kind of materials, this much is going to this outlet. But with our team of nurses and techs and everybody in the OR building up these impressive volumes, we started tracking.
I didn't know you were in a list of wanted. I didn't news to your father. I didn't know you were stealing.
So we took this on as kind of a process improvement, quality improvement project. And I'll just grumble that PCH didn't want to hear about it at the quality day, but it was presented at a regional conference with quite a large attendance, and we found that we were diverting 480 kilos. Right, do the math. That's about half a ton a month from landfill, from one suite of operating rooms in one hospital in one city. And you start thinking about the scale of that if those efforts expand out to other places. And it's not just a drop in a bucket. So number of partners which we were working with, moving those materials out. And this is, I put this in here as the poster we had presented at this conference. So, and you got to address the challenges, right? So we tried to plan, we had an idea, we went out and did it. We're measuring how we're doing, but of course there are challenges that come along the way. One is changing habits, right? So here we are wheeling out a cart of stuff, and you go right by a trash can with a bunch of corrugated cardboard just stuffed into it. Like, all right, well, hang on a second. We'll take this. We'll go put it in the car. We'll take that and put it in the home bin. And this is, I showed those pictures at the Phoenix airport, right? This is in our own sub-sterile area in our operating room. So there's a recycle bin, and here's a cardboard box in the trash right next to it. Some of these are habits, behaviors. Some of them are a matter of awareness and spreading knowledge and empowering people to avail themselves of other options. COVID was an interesting hitch in all this because we became very concerned about what we did not fully understand, the degree of contagion, the risk of communicable disease being transmitted through inanimate vectors. And so at that time, I'd gotten interested in what can we do with these yellow gowns? And I'm looking at my friend as I say, but that's a hard one, a separate topic, the yellow gowns. But you guys remember walking in the back entrance, the south side of PCH past the ER, where there'd be the wall with the masks up there, right? We had to get our temperatures scanned and stuff. And every one of those boxes, every one of those little mask boxes were then grouped into half a dozen or a dozen of these larger cardboard boxes. And these things were just piling up and getting taken out into trash. So we made that an opportunity, and we started going by and had members of our team going by and collecting carts of this materials. That's just less than a week's worth of boxes there. In our sterile processing department, that's what that other picture is. In our sterile processing department, I got to talking with the manager there about the cost of obtaining non-sterile but clean gowns for staff protection while they do their work and wash the instruments and so forth. I was like, well, you're spending money to buy something that's getting thrown out clean and unused upstairs in the operating room. So what you're seeing there is just a rack of all these gowns. That's about a week and a half worth when I took this picture of gowns that were clean and unused, and we stacked there to divert internally and allow those to be reused by our staff. Space is a big challenge. I showed you the size of these carts here starting to cart out. And so trying to allocate space, have space to store these materials is really tough. And I told you we started with these recycling bins in each operating room. And then this, soiled linen hamper here was the one other thing that we had for reusable materials. And like I said, it's show and tell here, and we can talk about all the different kinds of materials that can be reused. But around this time, a few years ago, Susan Johnson came on board as our new OR manager. And it was like, this was a huge win because she was very invested in this. We needed her support, and we got all this space. So we went from this little hamper to this rack. The rack we went and appropriated. There was nothing shady there, but it was actually unused and sitting in a corner somewhere. Somebody was trying to figure out what to do with it, and they were going to throw it out because they didn't know anything else to do with it. So just know we got a place for this, we'll use it. And you saw on the other slide, like, haters are going to hate. So I think we're okay enough on time that I'll put in this quick story because I think it's funny. And I think the person who I'll leave nameless, but I think they're listening over from the operating room. I was giving one of the in-services to our operating room staff and answering questions about, okay, where are we now? What can we put in the recycling bins? What can we not? What should we absolutely not? So on and so forth. And people were asking questions and so forth. There was a bit of quiet, and I was given more content. And then one of the very seasoned nurses raised her hand, and I thought, I know her very well. I know the personality very well. I thought, oh no, I'm not sure where this is going to go. I remember I was talking, drops in the bucket and wasting time and all this stuff. And this individual said, it is far better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. And I was like, I'm weak in the knees. That's fantastic. Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Yes, you got to start somewhere. You got to do all these things. And that's a quotation that's been attributed. Anybody heard that before? By hands, who's heard that before? It's been attributed to a number of people. That's a whole nother story I dug into. But anyway, it's a great line. So we had this progress. We moved along, and I told you kind of naturally along the way how we started expanding. Let me tell you a bit more about other moves forward. So I showed you these guys and how we expanded to this rack. And here you've got the reprocessing collection bins for a company that we started contracting with through Medline. It's a Medline subsidiary which reprocesses disposable materials. I appropriated for myself this rack to go from that hamper to several feet up the wall that we could store more materials in. There's Heather from the operating room showing you, this is a week's worth of unused cautery pen tips. And the actual entire pen units that come in packs for the operating room go unused and are thrown out. And when I show up in Honduras, with a little bundle of these that just were truly, literally being thrown in the trash, it's like Santa Claus came along, because these are very difficult to get a hold of, particularly when you're resource limited. And each individual one of these that we throw away unused, they will use 40, 50, 60 times and just keep re-sterilizing them. So, yeah, there's a little collection over like a week. There's those cautery pens. it's hard to unsee the waste once you start looking at it. Once you see it, it's just hard to turn a blind eye. Dr. Kirkulis, people know Dr. Kirkulis in our homeless outreach program. He had really begun exploring, he was looking at all this expanded polystyrene, all the styrofoam containers in which his vaccines were arriving. And he found outlets, these are two right here regionally, Champlain and earth-friendly building materials, which actually use these materials literally to construct house building blocks, as well as insulation and so forth. And so that's been Gary's thing. He's been working on the site. IT started collecting batteries around to recycle. I realized in all my talking with with Ramon and his predecessor in sterile processing that there are a lot of instruments that we as fussy American surgeons are too fancy to use because it's got a nick here or something there, but are perfectly fine and usable. So take some of these materials and take them elsewhere and realize, oh, there's an outlet for metal. These are things that are beyond repair and damage. And so we found there's my little guy, Parsa, and we found revolutionized recycling here in Phoenix. It's a great metal recycler. And I asked him, do you care if things have a spot of blood or some saliva or something on it that's dry? No, it's a metal recycler. We don't care what's on it. We're getting things that have dung on them, right? And it just goes in, it gets mashed and crumpled and eventually melted and smelted. So no, none of that matters. That all happened around the time as the story of the laryngoscopes began. And there's a number of our anesthesiologists that I engaged in this to help us. There's a transition to disposable laryngoscopes, and that had to do with cost of re-sterilizing them and these concerns that came about bioburden on the laryngoscopes, which you heard a lot about with flexible endoscopes, GI endoscopes as well. So there's a transition to these disposable laryngoscopes. We started deconstructing them, recycling them. Dr. Gardner in anesthesiology was tremendously helpful with this. Dr. Pate, Dr. Hengelfeld, Dr. Kallmeyer, Dr. Kim gathered everybody together on this mission. Those are trash bins, like your home big giant trash bin full of the handles of these disposable laryngoscopes. It's all aluminum. There's some other minor pieces in there that are steel, all recyclable. And we've now transitioned to a product that has an associated recycling program, but we haven't subscribed to that yet. You know, a lot of things are on pause at the hospital as there's a change in leadership. So there's more on that story to come in the future, but hundreds of pounds of metal. I mentioned briefly about reprocessing. We've built up a relationship with particularly Medline's renewal reprocessing plant. Whole another hour-long conversation, and particularly a great one with our surgeons, where there's a lot of inherent bias against reprocessed instruments and what the quality is or isn't. But we don't have time to dig into all these things. So we adjusted the packs, these procedure packs that are ordered by the hospital and open for each operation that have a handful of gowns and towels and suction tubing and, you know, plastic containers and Bovie tips that I assume are going to be used for every operation. You start tracking and finding out 95% of the operations were not using item X. 85% were not using item Y. Maybe we can remove those from the default packaging list. And as we mentioned a little bit before about putting things in the right receptacle, there's a bit of culture to change, right? Nobody wants the mean surgeon yelling because, oh, you didn't have this ready or that ready. Why do you have to go get it now or open it now? It just takes a bit of forethought. It takes a bit of communication, and you can avoid waste in that manner. Culture has changed. The expectations have changed. Most of that sort of behavior is really, I think most of us consider that unprofessional and disappointing, and in many places is simply not tolerated. So there are other means of adjusting what we do. This is another Lorax reference. I know that guy. My kids are excluded from answering. That's O'Hare, the guy who sold clean air. So we started looking at direct atmospheric impacts. And there are a few different routes here. Dr. Hussain's taken up in anesthesiology has taken up the mantle with looking at volatile anesthetic waste. This is something awareness and research that started in Seattle several years ago. And Dr. Hussain's been working with IT and gathering data here about their anesthetic gas usage. Those anesthetic gases, sevoflurane, isoflurane, desflurane, you guys know where they go when the patient exhales it or what's not absorbed? Yeah, that's what Dr. Hansen said. It's just out in the air. This got me thinking, we use carbon dioxide as an inert, non-compressible gas for distension of particularly the abdominal cavity to do minimally invasive surgery, and that just goes out in the air too. So I don't know if that's a significant amount or not, but one of our medical students who's rotating with us, I was talking with her about this, she got interested. We started looking into it. We've been exploring this a bit, and she's gotten herself a podium presentation and a manuscript in the progress on her way to residency application. Some people may have seen these signs up a year and a half ago around the hospital, maybe even brought up some of your socks. That's Lale and Roya there. And we talk about waste a lot around our house. We have this idea of textile recycling. There are places that do a lot of textile recycling. And the time we had found through TerraCycle, Gold Toe Socks was doing this. There are other people around H&M and so forth that have been gathering things and processing for recycling. And they gathered over the course of a few weeks as kind of a community project, some 60-some pounds of socks that went to recycling. That 60 pounds doesn't change the world, but the message and the planting of the seed are meaningful. So this is Girl Scout Troop 3218, along with Mayor Katie Gallegos last year. And these guys went and made this any former Girl Scouts in here? Awesome, some, awesome. So they earned their bronze award with this project and collected some hundreds of pounds of textiles for recycling. They're otherwise just going to go and trash. And these went to a local company here called Phoenix Fibers, which was, that's the other thing I forgot this morning. I was going to show you what it looks like, the material. They break it down to and break down all these recyclable materials and make like insulation for food shipping containers and stuffing for prison mattresses and all manner of things. I was talking one of these nights in the trauma bay with one of our ER nurses, Tara Kranak, and talking about the shame of all this clothing that's cut off and gets thrown away or gets given to families to go, unless there's a special emotional attachment to it or something, that it's just wasted. And so we've started a program, kind of an exploration, where we've been asking families, do you want this? If you don't, we're going to recycle it. And that goes into a bag. We've worked with housekeeping and EVS. This goes down to them. They launder it. They send it back to us. We take it to Phoenix Fibers, gets recycled into shoddy fiber. That's what it looks like inside their warehouse at Phoenix Fibers. Again, whole nother story. So all these next steps we can take. I think we can take this beyond the OR. We just talk about here in our house, in our community. We can take this beyond the OR with new viewpoints, new clinical expertise and daily realms. We'll identify further opportunities. I want to enlist more people in this. We can get to where we have redundancy and some degree of automation. So it's not Ramin or Nicole or whoever just kind of, individually pushing the carts down the hall. And if we band together, Dr. Kim's been a big advocate Dr. Kim in anesthesiology has been a big advocate for this as well. If we kind of compile all our efforts together and bring them under one umbrella, we can probably galvanize and have a stronger voice. We had this in the past with the hospital green team that Michaela Mackey on supply chain and I helped lead up, but that was dissolved several years back. corporate engagement will come easier that way. And I think that'll be key. Styrofoam, storage and transportation. James, you know what's in that styrofoam box. That's another story of other use. Soft plastics, packaging, blue wrap, whole nother story. This is a really tough one. I've told you guys, you know it, you've heard the stories around the country of plastic shopping bags being disallowed in certain places. There are certain companies, the one I've partnered with the most is, or in particular, is Trex, their Next Trex program. Have you heard of Trex? They make the non-wood building materials, the 2x4s that are recycled plastic, right, for building. And we ship soft plastics to them. I've been going through and sending them endless samples for them to test and analyze what's acceptable, what's not. This package of Tegaderm, is that acceptable? No. Is this package for the Curlex? Yes. Okay. And you just build up a catalog that way. Optimized sorting. When non-hazardous materials, non-sharps go in the sharps waste, there's tremendous monetary cost to that. Those things are destroyed and incinerated. So there are environmental aspects. There's also monetary cost that's impact all these other materials. There's so many options, so many places we can go with this. And talking about storage and transportation, we got to get away from the minivan shuttle. We can impact utilities usage. There are manifold options of directions we can go with this. We have people who are engaged and motivated and want to put in the elbow grease. We've approached the kitchen in the past, food services, about composting, and there's been some interest in the leadership there. Then we hit COVID, and a lot of things changed. So it may be time to bring that up again. And in the waning minutes here, I just want to bring up, I think there's really room here to drive change through consumer demand, right? We are in the Western capitalistic world. The market forces are supply and demand. And if the consumer demands something or demonstrates that they'll even, good Lord, pay more for something that they want more, then the suppliers, the manufacturers will respond to that. Because in the end, they want the sales. Let's give them credit. Maybe they even want more than that. Maybe they want to do the right thing. I mean, what's the line, right? Hospital discharge begins when? At admission, right? Discharge begins at admission. So why don't we have it that anything that is manufactured, I know this is going to sound crazy, but anything that's manufactured should have on it stamped where the end of its life cycle is. Right? Oh, this is recyclable in category X. This is non-recyclable. This needs to be split into 3 pieces, and then it's recyclable. So we've got myriad extramural partners. Each one of these has a story behind them. Like I say, I can tell you anecdotes. We've got key staff here that have been key in allowing us to build all these things up. There's some names I couldn't even get to, but thank you, everybody, and thank you for letting me stand up here, tell the story, and you guys for your attention this morning. Now, I want those of you who are interested to pitch in, get in touch with me, give a hand. And then the home team is key, because at our house, these things pile up, and we're sorting, and we're moving these things. Okay, I mean, my wife took the minivan to Project Cure yesterday, and we're going to Treasures for Teacher next week. We'll make a run there. And this is actually a picture. We were on a hike in British Columbia. Noticed some trash over on this. We were hiking up a ski hill. Noticed some trash on the hill. Decided, well, let's go this way, and just followed the trash down the hill. And this was all the stuff we picked up in just a 30-minute hike down. More stories, but thank you, kids, for your help, and thank you, Melissa, for putting up with the mess around. And thank you all once again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Turn on the order of lights.
Okay.
Why don't you use this one now?
Okay.
Okay, and a couple questions came in the chat already.
Okay.
First one, how can we mobilize hospital leadership to become engaged in these efforts?
The question was, how can we mobilize? Is your microphone on as well? I don't need to repeat it or?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. That's a challenging one. I think that what helps us there is that the model is set. We're not the first people to want to do that. Like I said, you have Fortune 500 companies that that have chief sustainability officers. So as we have new leadership in the hospital, some of those interests, we may have an audience for those interests where there wasn't sometimes previously Gesundheit. And so I think the strongest support of that is for us as the body of employees of the hospital to speak up and make known if that's something that's important and matters to us. We're told that they really pay attention at the very high levels to the employee survey every year. So a very concrete thing to say is say it on the employee survey. I imagine as we have a new CEO coming, there's going to be a fair bit of polling around departments and staff and folks to know who we are as a crowd and what we want.
Not a question, but just a comment. I think this is the time, so especially as well. The other thing is obviously now with Medicaid cuts, there's a closer look at cost savings in the hospital. This should be part of that, right? Because I mean, I'm not saying that there was no interest in the C-suite. That interest was there.
Mm-hmm.
So add on now all the cost savings that happen, all the things that you show. I think the next couple of months is the key to start working on this so that we can get the attention.
I really appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly agree. And when you try and do the numbers, it's hard. The leadership that to their credit, they have to be accountable for the numbers, right? They have to keep the lights on for us all. They have to balance the books. And so they need the numbers. And when you do the back of the envelope math, it kind of gets sloppy, but there are means to do it. And if you just take that, that mass, just a simple number, 480 kilograms a month, and take what that costs in waste disposal and negate that or convert it to a credit from recycling, those are numbers.
Just another
Yeah.
take the time. But the other place where we can work on this is pharmacy. Right? There's all the, and this is something that we talk about in my local stewardship, all the wasted medications that are there that never make it to that side. Like the antibiotics that they're supposed to take in, is compared to the money. And that there's a huge cost saving there specifically, other than obviously the environmental patients.
Yeah. Everybody hearing out on the sides. Huge opportunity in pharmacy in terms of wasted medications. Dr. Hansen?
My perception of not just bottom line follows bottom line. One of the or I'm sitting on one bench where somebody gets a difference in how match everything. But I'm interested what don't match on that. That was to a first bad question. On how do we mitigate that perception? This infection not forbidden by every single day packages.
Yeah, I don't know if it reached the microphones up front. Dr. Hansen was asking about the concerns about sterility, cleanliness. mitigation of infectious risks. And if I'm paraphrasing fairly, to sort of speak back against reactive policies where suddenly, let's say there's one infection, one notable patient event, but then a whole policy and purchasing pattern and materials use gets changed. I think part of that comes from just education and discussion in this way. I think it comes from dissecting out those cases where there's a sudden event. Some of it's baked into our human nature. A bad event happens and all of a sudden, well, now we need to make a policy and we need to change everything we've been doing, right? And sometimes joke about how some of these things that we see on a daily basis or discuss or lobby for don't make a difference until it's a congressman's cousin or somebody that becomes affected, and then it's relevant. Oh, Brian Waldy for Congress, by the way. Sorry, I didn't get political, but one of our nurse practitioners is interested in a seat in government to speak up. So I'm not making a political comment. Just one of our colleagues is into this. So and the other thing I want to mention, Eric, in response to your question, is that we also have to. I think we can't be single-minded about. We can't have a myopic view and say, well, all this stuff. You're just going to throw all this stuff. It'll get reused somewhere, because there may be some soiled materials in there. You got to separate those out. And there are ways of doing that proactively before the collection. And then there are means of doing it during the sorting. And in general, I tell people all the time, if you're uncertain or there's a spot of soilage, just get rid of it. It's not worth it. Don't poison the rest of the goods with one questionable or potentially contaminated item, because it may or may not make a real difference, but the perception of it alone can be terribly damaging. If that happens on the line of the materials processing facility, waste management, that whole giant container that came gets tossed. There was a needle on there. Throw all that out. You can have sharps on. I hope that answers that to some extent.
I think what resonates with me is your use of like quality science just to look at this, because I feel like it goes on activity we have to make a change, but we don't always stop and say, well, what's the answer to this? I think about a lot of our quality measures and our division. Oh, we're trying to go over faster, we're trying to get our prescriptions written earlier, and that does lead to some waste. But at some point, you have to look at it. How much is that waste? Is it for paper? Because there are things we do that I think really do generate some waste, but we can. So I think the element of studying the outcome, and I respect the fact that trying to really put this into it is part of conversation. I think any change that's followed up with here's the data, here's why, here's the downstream effect, here's the balancing.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's not the highbrow fancy stuff. It's just, it came out of passion. And then some people started nudging me and saying, hey, why aren't you spreading this message? Why don't you write this up? And I said, well, a long time ago, I got away from writing things up just to write them up or put a bullet on my CV or whatever. Like, no, but you have learned lessons or found out information that is worthy of dissemination to others. So I realized that's absolutely a valid point. So that's how we started writing these abstracts and mentoring projects and things. Dr. Egan.
Great, thank you. Top idea of like recognition, credit, increase what's produce. Anytime I get plastic problem, there's perception amongst many people out there, not only here, but and plastics no longer get the recycling. Plastics then get shifted to some far off country that is their room because they don't ever get recycled. What is your knowledge of that process? Is that something?
I appreciate that, Craig. The question, if it didn't reach the front microphones, is basically, do plastics really get recycled? than the end of it. So a recent computer science study I was reading, they actually looked, and misinformation and disinformation spreads more rapidly in in the world of social media than accurate information. It's just the nature of it. It's just the how or why, but that's the fact. And so, yes, there's a lot of information out there, and clearly people have done things where they've said, oh, I put an air tag on my waste and tracked where it went, and it never went to the recycling facility. I don't know how rigorous that was. I don't know where they followed that. Was that for sensationalism? I don't know. So to the best of my knowledge, to answer your question, here, the things we are aiming at recycling, I'll just bring it right to our house, are getting recycled. I've followed the trucks. I've been out to the facilities. I've seen the processes. And so I believe it to be real. That's me sharing with you my anecdote, but, as a colleague, coworker, neighbor, you maybe believe me more than, Joe Schmo on Instagram. But I'm sure there are places where it's not happening. And there are reasons that some places it doesn't happen. And the two biggest factors in that are, one, poor selection of materials. So you gave them stuff that they can't recycle, and it's still like poisoning the batch. You put in a couple pieces of plastic that don't mingle with the others, and then it gums up their works. And so then that leads some companies to drive away from that. Whole separate category and discussion, which I'm only somewhat knowledgeable about, is that several years ago, our outlets for recycling plastic changed significantly. Much of recycled plastic, what happens is it gets melted down by type, gets pelletized, turns into these little pieces, and then companies making products, whether for their packaging or the products, then soften them and press them into the new shape and color and whatever. And a lot of this was happening in China. And China, several years ago, 5, 6, changed their policies with short notice and said, we're not taking this stuff anymore, and we're not taking that stuff anymore. We're shifting gears. It was out there for a little while. There were these barges parked off of China's mainland with recyclable plastics that had been accepted but hadn't yet arrived as the policy changed. And these guys were sitting there, what do we do with this? So some of it is what's happened with the outlets for plastics, and some of it is our collection and sorting and isolation. There is constantly new science. If you scan like the chemical engineering and material science journals in breakdown of plastics or construction out of different materials. So there's still more to advance. And meanwhile, we're finding out that, there's microplastics on the peak of Mount Everest and in, aquatic sperm and whatever else. So.
I think we're out of time, so we need to conclude. There's a couple of comments in the chat that I'll let him, for those of you who still on Zoom, stay on Zoom and he can answer them in the chat. But thank you very much.